There's something nobody tells you about getting older. The hardest day of your life isn't the day you retire. It isn't the day your body starts slowing down. It's the moment you realize your children don't really need you anymore. I realized that at 75. Not after some huge argument, not because I was sent to a nursing home, just because of one small sentence my daughter said to me. "Dad, you don't have to come anymore. We're fine." We're fine. It sounded harmless, but that night, I sat alone in my car outside a grocery store parking lot for almost an hour. And for the first time in my life, I honestly didn't know what my role was anymore. My name is Walter Brooks. I'm 75 years old. I owned an auto repair shop in Ohio for over 40 years. My whole life was built around fixing things. Broken cars, broken engines, broken appliances. And like a lot of men from my generation, I believed a father's job was to take care of his family. I worked 6 days a week for most of my adult life. There were winters when snow piled up past my ankles, and I still got up at 5 a.m. to open the shop. I missed my son's birthdays, missed my daughter's softball games. But I always told myself, one day they'll understand. Then I got older. My wife passed away when I was 71. After the funeral, the house became unbearably quiet. No sound from her television in the background. No slippers sliding across the kitchen floor. Some mornings, I still made 2 cups of coffee out of habit. Then I'd suddenly remember, only one of us was left to drink it. The first few years after retirement, my life revolved around my kids. My son needed help fixing his roof. I was there. My daughter needed someone to pick up the grandkids. I drove 40 minutes without complaining once. I thought it made me useful. And honestly, maybe I was afraid of what would happen if nobody needed me anymore. Every time my phone rang and I saw one of my kids' names on the screen, my whole day felt meaningful. Until things slowly started changing. Very slowly. Very quietly. First it was, "Dad, we got it." Then, "Dad, you shouldn't drive that far." Then, "Just relax and take it easy." It sounded caring, but to an old father, it felt like doors slowly closing one by one. One day, my son hired someone to repair his garage. I found out through Facebook. Nobody called me. Nobody asked me. I stared at a photo of some young contractor standing in front of the garage I had personally helped build 20 years earlier. And the feeling I had was strange. Not anger, more like I had been replaced. That's when I started realizing my kids didn't need my advice anymore. They asked Google. They didn't need me to fix things anymore. They hired services. They didn't need me to babysit anymore. They got a sitter. And the hardest part was, they weren't doing anything wrong. That's just modern life. But even understanding that, my heart still felt empty. One evening, I brought food over to my daughter's house without calling first. I thought I'd surprise them. When I got there, the whole family was already getting ready to go out for dinner. My son-in-law glanced at his watch. My daughter forced a small smile. "Dad, why didn't you call first?" I stood there holding a hot tray of lasagna like a delivery driver who showed up at the wrong address. Then she said, "You can just leave it here if you want." You can just leave it here. Nobody told me to leave. Nobody was rude. But walking back to my car, I realized something. I was no longer naturally part of their everyday lives anymore. After that, I started living in waiting mode, waiting for phone calls, waiting for weekends, waiting for Thanksgiving, waiting for Christmas. Some days, I kept the television on from morning until night, just to hear voices inside the house. I remember one night I had mild chest pain around midnight. I picked up my phone to call my son. Then I put it back down. I didn't want to bother him. And honestly, that might be the scariest part of aging. Not when you're hurting, but when you're hurting and you don't know if you still matter enough to call someone. One Sunday afternoon, I drove to a park near my house. I sat there watching an older man playing chess with a little boy. They laughed loudly every few minutes. I watched them for almost half an hour. And suddenly, something hit me. I had spent so much time trying to hold on to my old role that I never noticed life was trying to give me a new one. That evening, instead of going straight home, I stopped by a local senior community center. They had a free repair workshop every Tuesday night. I almost turned around and left. I remember thinking, what's a 75-year-old man doing here? But then one of the staff members walked up to me. She asked, "You used to work with tools?" I nodded. She smiled and said, "Good. We could really use someone like you." We could really use someone like you. I didn't realize how badly I needed to hear those words. The first week, I just helped people replace light fixtures, fix old toasters, repair cabinet doors. The second week, a young guy brought in his grandfather's old radio. It hadn't worked in nearly 20 years. I spent over an hour repairing it, and when the music finally came on, that young man almost cried. He looked at me and said, "My grandpa used to listen to this every morning." That night, for the first time in years, I drove home feeling useful again. Slowly, I started making friends. Frank, a retired teacher, Helen, who had lost her husband 3 years earlier. After class, we'd sit together drinking coffee, talking about aging, talking about our children, talking about that quiet feeling of being left behind. And I realized something. Almost everyone there had once believed, my children don't need me anymore. But the truth is, when your children grow up, it doesn't mean your life is over. It just means your role has changed. Nobody teaches us that. We spend our entire lives learning how to be parents. Then one day, the kids grow up. They build lives of their own, and we're left standing there, not knowing who we are outside of being mom or dad. I used to think the worst part of aging was loneliness, but it's not. The worst part is losing your sense of purpose. One day my daughter called and asked, "Dad, are you free this Saturday?" Out of habit, I almost said, "I'm always free." But then I looked at my calendar. I had a workshop at the community center, and for the first time in years, I said, "I'm busy Saturday morning, but I'm free later that afternoon." There was silence on the other end for a second. Then she laughed. "Well, how? Dad's got his own schedule now?" I laughed too. But inside, something shifted. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just sitting around waiting to be needed anymore. I had started living my own life again. And strangely enough, once I stopped attaching my entire emotional world to my children, our relationship actually became lighter and better. I stopped calling constantly, stopped feeling hurt when they were busy, stopped counting the days since their last visit. I love my children, more than anything. But eventually I understood this. Your children were never meant to be the only reason you feel valuable. There's a sentence I heard at the community center that has stayed with me ever since. Being needed feels good, but being meaningful lasts longer. And that's true. If you're watching this right now and you feel like your children are drifting away, please don't assume your life is shrinking. Maybe this is simply the moment you begin rediscovering who you are outside of being a parent. You still have wisdom, you still have stories, you still have a heart capable of loving people. And somewhere out there, someone still needs exactly that. Not because you're young, not because you're strong, but because you're still you. Turning 75 isn't the end of life. Sometimes it's the beginning of a completely different kind of life.